Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and today we're continuing the Investigator discussion series with Zoey Samaras. Zoey is one of those characters where they have both a vanilla and a parallel, and because you have 4 combinations of that, you have pure vanilla, you have pure parallel, and then you have both variants of mix and match vanilla front, parallel back, and vice versa, I'm only going to be talking in depth about the specific configuration of Zoey and parallel Zoey that I think is the best. I'm going to briefly start by reading the stat line of Zoey, everything that's constant across all versions, and then talk about why I think which version is better before moving on to a specific deck. To get started though, let's see what the original Zoey is. Zoey started off as 4 head, 2 foot, which is par for the course really for Guardians, decent head, bad foot. 4 head is good though, notably better than a lot of the 3 head Guardians, easier to fix that stat and become genuinely resilient to Mythos. 2 books not a problem, it's 1 wasted stat, but 1 wasted stat's not that many, and 4 fist is more than good enough to do your job as a Guardian fighter. This does pretty thoroughly lock her into wanting to be a Guardian fighter, although there are some interesting flex things you can try to do with her deck building rules in the 4 head. Zoey is, in my opinion, easily the best off as a main fighter. She has the ability to do other things. For certain team comps it can be relevant and interesting, but from a pure power perspective, what she leans into the best is always going to be fighting. And that's especially apparent once we get to her ability, reaction after you become engaged with an enemy, gain 1 resource. So she wants to engage enemies to gain money to fuel something. What is up to you? It is worth noting that this ability is a little bit awkward because the timing window for becoming engaged with an enemy doesn't actually happen for massive enemies. This is a common thing that trips up new players. You never engage a massive enemy. You just suddenly become considered engaged with them. It's some legalese nonsense, but the important part of this is their ability does not trigger on massive enemies. Her star effect is +1, but if you succeeded during an attack, it deals +1 damage. Now, a lot of the time, if you're playing a fighter, this will be coming up during fights. However, very frequently you're hitting a rat with 1 HP, doesn't matter with what, you're hitting a 2 HP guy with a 2 damage weapon, you are finishing off a 5 HP guy for the amount of health he has left. Very frequently, you're doing a Mythos test, or a fight test where 1 more damage changes nothing. This is really, really nice when it matters, but the best stars matter every time you pull them. And this will not matter in the vast majority of times that you see it, which is unfortunate. It's not a blank star, but it's not a great star either. Coming down to deck building size, she's your typical Dunwich Investigator, 30 deck size, Guardian 0 to 5, Neutral 0 to 5, and up to 5 other level 0 cards from any other class. This is what we call Dunwich Splash, and it's good. I really like it. I think it's a little bit restrictive these days at only 5 cards with such a large pool of cards competing for your attention, but it also means that these are going to be 5 incredible cards no matter what you're trying to use them for, whether you're doing stuff like Down the Rabbit Hole to help you with experience, Spectral Razor to help you with damage, trying to flex with stuff like Read the Signs or even Sixth Sense. There's a million different things you can do with Dunwich Splash, all of it effective, all of it valuable. You can just go pure draw with stuff like Cigarette Case and Deep Knowledge, right? It's always good. I really like the deck building, I just wish it wasn't quite so restrictive. And I forgot to mention that Zoey does have a 9-6 split on soak, which is very good. As a Dunwich Investigator, she has 1 extra point of soak, it's gone into her health, and coming over to the parallel version, you'll see she loses that. It's viewed as restrictive, the Dunwich deck building is, so as a bonus for having restrictive deck building, those characters all got 1 extra point of soak. Since Zoey doesn't get those deck building, or at least isn't intended to get those deck building rules, as the parallel version, she loses that point of soak on the parallel front. Her new reaction is after you deal 1 or more damage to an enemy, add a Bless token to the Chaos Bag limit once per phase. So if you're doing your job fighting enemies, now you're adding blesses to the bag. You're not Sister Mary, but you're close. You have to have an enemy to put the thing in the bag, you have to succeed, and you can't just start with 2 in the bag, but this is a lot of blesses going into the bag. And then as a lightning bolt, before you reveal a chaos token during the attack, you can remove 3 blesses from the chaos bag to make the attack deal +1 damage limit once per round. This is really good. This is once per round vicious blow with some criteria, and 3 blesses is a lot to burn for a vicious blow, but you're adding a ton in, and with cards like Ancestral Token, you can easily keep enough going to fuel this as often as you'll need it. I personally think the parallel front is much, much stronger. I have a problem with the original Zoey's front, where I refer to this type of effect as economy later. It's a catch-all phrase I use to describe Tommy Muldoon as well. What I mean when I say economy later is it is not economy I have during the first 3 turns. I will never be able to see that much money out of Zoey Samaras' ability before the setup phase ends when we have to go. I need my economy to set up, to get my assets that do the job in play, to play critical events that are somehow required for me to do my job. Economy is at its most important by far turn 1, 2, even 3, and it steadily gets less valuable as time goes on. That is not to say that economy later has no value. but it is to say that while it is cool that Zoey Samaras uniquely enables stuff like agency backup and other massively expensive allies that other characters might struggle to afford, it is a lot less powerful to have +1 resource every turn than +5 resources on turn 1. I think that Zoey's original ability is good, but I think it's often overstated how good this is, because to really capitalize on it, it's stuff that's going to be dead in your hand for a couple of turns. It doesn't make your economy constraints and making your deck that much lighter. It really, in my opinion, is not that powerful. It's not nothing, but I would massively prefer to single-handedly enable the Bless archetype for my team and get Vicious Blow whenever I want it, to being able to run some slightly more expensive assets later in the scenario, or maybe cut 1 or 2 economy cards. Coming on to parallel deck building rules though, deck size 30, Guardian cards level 0 to 3, Blessed and Charm 0 to 4, Neutral 0 to 5, and up to 5 other Mystic cards level 0. Considering Mystic cards are really good, and I tend to really gravitate towards those when I'm building a Zoey anyway, Spectral Razor, Promise of Power, and Down the Rabbit Hole all stand out as brilliant cards in a Zoey deck. I don't really mind the Dunwich Splash becoming Mystic Splash. What I mind quite a lot is Guardian 0 to 3. That's restricting my access to the best weapons in the game quite a lot. If I wanted to play with Parallel Zoey back, I'd almost certainly end up playing a Survival Knife type of deck, and in exchange, I get Blessed and Charm cards 0 to 4, and I really can't make any argument that I would prefer that, because really the strongest stuff in Blessed that you're getting access to is going to be Ancient Covenant, and that's nice, but outside of that, there's really not a ton that Zoey's going to be picking up from this that I really highly value. I'd much prefer the better ability to do my job as fighter, which, if I'm going Parallel Zoey, my job is so clearly fight. I have to do so much work to be a flex character with these base stats. I'm clearly meant to be a fighter. I'd rather be great at fighting and then trust my team to do the Bless stuff. This is something where it's how I view the game. You don't need to enable and capitalize on Bless. If you enable it, you can capitalize on it to a little bit, and if you capitalize on it, you should help to enable it a little bit, but you don't have to be the person who gets the benefit from the Bless tokens you put in the bag. So giving up my massively powerful late game Guardian stuff in exchange for slightly better Bless capitalization, maybe. I'm not even really convinced it's that much better. Basically, like I said, it's mostly just Ancient Covenant. I really don't like Parallel Zoey's back very much at all. I don't think it's super interesting, and I don't think it offers a lot of power. So when I'll be talking about Zoey going forward, I'm going to be talking about Vanilla Zoey's front and Parallel Zoey's back. Before we go on, I need to cover her signatures and why I would not run the advanced versions. Zoey's Cross is a 1-cost accessory slot item, commits for 3 fists if you need it, and after you become engaged with an enemy, exhaust it, spend a resource, deal damage. That's much better than her original ability. If you get this into play, now her ability is deal 1 damage when you engage an enemy, once per round, and that's really powerful. Her weakness is Smite the Wicked, not a big deal, pulls an enemy out of the Mythos deck, attaches to it. If you don't kill it before the game ends, you get a mental trauma. This can randomly give you a mental trauma, but with better head and better horror soak than a Roland, it's not the scariest thing in the world. Additionally, as the main fighter, this is frequently your job and something you're not going to struggle with that much. There's also some sick counter-tech cards you can run later in a campaign to teleport across the map and instantly kill the guy if it's really a problem, but that's not really been necessary in my experience. Coming up to the advanced version with the Parallel Zoey, the Cross gets an incredibly powerful new line of text. Lightning Bolt, remove 2 Bless tokens from the Chaos bag, engage an enemy at your location. That's really good. Free actions are free actions. This is extremely helpful for dealing with aloof enemies, for any situation where you have to engage for fear of shooting over and killing your Clover. But it's also a lot of blesses to be removing from the bag, to be taking the vicious blows, taking the free engages. It's not free, and it does use up a lot of the blesses you put in, but it is good. However, the new Smite the Wicked is genuinely a problem. Giving the random enemy +2 fight and +2 health is terrifying. I personally wouldn't run the advanced versions because of this. Giving the enemy +2 fight and +2 health, if you pull something that was actually threatening from the deck, let's say a Deep Wind Bowl that's now 6 fist and 7 health, good fucking luck. The new Smite the Wicked is usually not gonna be that big of a deal. There'll be a really angry rat and you'll have to kill him and he'll come over to you because he has Hunter, right? It's not the biggest deal most of the time. But the capacity for this to just create a ridiculous boss enemy that you cannot deal with is, in my eyes, not worth this new line of text, especially because those Bless tokens had value. This isn't just free value. Someone on your team was going to do something with those Bless tokens, and I don't think this downside is worth using them to engage instead. I can't see a stronger way to build Zoey than half parallel Zoey using the parallel front to enable Bless and to get those vicious blows, and then building with Ancestral Token to make sure that you fully enable the Bless archetype for the rest of your team. As for what the best way to fight is, you don't need me to say it, you know. I've said it enough, no one likes hearing it, I don't even like saying it at this point. There are plenty of other options than Runic Axe though. It's worth noting that Parallel Zoey is one of the best users of Radiant Smite in the entire game, and where Sister Miri might look at this and think, I can't spend 1 experience on Radiant Smite right now, I have to be able to fix my 3-fist and fight all the enemies, not just kill the boss. Parallel Zoey can easily take a Radiant Smite first upgrade if she wanted to, and just completely get by with stuff like machetes and enchanted blades without much work to fix it. So while I think Runic Axe is definitely the strongest way to build Zoey, as is often the case in these decks, Runic Axe is not a core part of this deck. You can fight with other things. I can like go down the list and start naming like Survival Knife, Cyclopean Hammer, Flamethrower. There are a lot of options. They're like clear tiers of power within Guardian weapons, and Runic Axe is just so far at the top I have a hard time justifying not running it. And one of the biggest parts of why Runic Axe so often shows up in these decks is that Runic Axe is a one-stop shop for enemy management. I don't need anything else. I don't need a main hand weapon to go with my Survival Knife. I don't need to reload the Flamethrower. When I put Runic Axe in as my method of fighting, I get a 28 card deck that doesn't care about Runic Axe, and it just works really smoothly. Whereas if I want to use a different method of main fighting, unless I pick like specifically Cyclopean Hammer, there will be other moving pieces to that method for fighting. I don't often talk about that part of Runic Axe's power, but I think it's important here in something like a Blessed Fighter, where I want to make room for Radiant Smite, where I want Wolf Mask to help my terrible foot. I need to put in Ancestral Token. And the more stuff I need to cram to my deck that isn't my main role, drawing, and economy, the less room I have for more complicated methods of solving the fight problem. Now, this is a 37 experience deck, and I spent a while toying with it. The original deck I played was much more expensive than this by the end of the campaign, like 50 something experience, and I wanted to get it down to 30. I was like, oh man, what do I cut here? And I decided not to cut it from 37. I knew what the cut was, it's Nephthys. Nephthys is comically expensive. On my wish list for the taboo, one of them is I just want to see Nephthys unchained to 3. At 4 experience, she simply doesn't do enough on her own to really justify being an early buy in any character. I'm not saying that she's bad at all. I'm just saying that she doesn't perform at the level of a 4 experience card, and you can't rely on her to do anything on its own, so she can never be your first buy and very frequently won't be your second buy either, especially in a class where most people who want Nephthys also won't stick to the plan. I do want to mention though that Nephthys is uniquely good with a Parallel Zoey on the team. Frequently you'll see Nephthys just be there to catch the Bless tokens as people pull them. Somebody pulls a Bless token, it goes on Nephthys instead of going away, and then Nephthys exhausts to put 3 of them back in the bag. But with a Parallel Zoey, you can very easily just pull 3 Vicious Blow, put them back immediately. If it's a really scary enemy, then just put them away entirely and deal 2 damage. Nephthys is by far at her best in Parallel Zoey, and it is the one character where I'd be like, you know what? If you want to say fuck Runic Axe and upgrade Nephthys first, it's not wrong. It's the only character where it's even close to a decision, and that unique interaction is really, really good. And this deck, as my decks often are, is just very streamlined. We have Ancestral Token to put Blesses in the bag for the rest of our team, Nephthys to keep them there or explosively use them in the case of terrifying monsters, and Radiant Smite for massive burst damage, as well as for some sort of backups in case we miss the Runic Axe. We have Brandigathuga as a backup weapon, Enchanted Blade is a frankly redundant backup weapon, but it costs 0 XP so it gets to stay from the starter deck. We run Safeguards because they are just monstrously efficient actions, Wolf Mask for Crypt Chill Fodder to help with our 2-foot. Deep Knowledge is a wonderful way to use our flex cards because it helps us just draw the things we actually care about. Promise of Power, same thing. It's just one of the best Mythos Resilience cards in the game, and you will often see me making just very typical, straightforward Dumb Witch Splash choices like this, where there's a bunch of really cool things I can do, but I can also just guarantee someone pass a Mythos test and I can't say no to that. For the 5th one, Down the Rabbit Hole is not actually terrible in Zoey. You can make decks that capitalize on it to a disgusting level. I chose Practice Makes Perfect because I have 8 practice skills that all work on a fight attempt, so yeah. You can very easily justify taking a second Practice Makes Perfect over a Deep Knowledge. The splash cards are so strong. It almost feels like it's neither here nor there. Zoey's deck is so incredibly powerful. Like, the weakest cards in the deck are, what? Wolf Mask. Wolf Mask and Overpower, probably. Stand Together level 3 is something that you will see in every single Guardian deck I show you, probably, because Stand Together level 3 is, in my opinion, one of the most criminally underrated cards, because no matter how good you think it is, it's better than that. Before we can talk about the upgrade path and the core deck, we need to show off how I'd start the deck, and the deck is pretty damn similar at starter. We have Machete, Runic Axe, and Enchanted Blade, so Machete becomes Branded Kathaga eventually. We start off with a Guard Dog instead of a Nephthys because, like, we want an ally for soak. You can easily run Tetsuo Mori here instead. I think that might be right the more I look at this. And then on the event side of things, we have Toe-to-Toes to stand in for Radiant Smites just because they do a similar thing in terms of overall deck construction. We don't have Stick to the Plan yet, so we have 2 emergency caches instead of 1 E-cache and 1 Ever Vigilant. And that's pretty much the entirety of the changes. There's a lot of stuff you can talk up putting in this final deck that's not necessarily wrong at all. There's a ton of cool ways you can spend experience. You can always just take Strong Arm to make your Runic Axe legitimately the most unfair thing in the game, but there's also stuff like Fang of Tirtha to just absolutely crush Smite the Wicked, make sure it's never a problem. It's also just good in general, but it's very, very expensive on experience. Oh, I should mention, my 1 of Practice Makes Perfect does neatly fit under Stick to the Plan with the normal economy package. It's just pretty gross to guarantee you'll hit your Practice Makes Perfect early with high density of skills left in the deck for your main role. And coming down to the level 0 deck, an unupgraded Runic Axe is not particularly impressive. Using In the Thick of It for Saga basically means it will easily handle anything a Scenario 1 can throw at you every single time. And I'm not going to pretend for a second that you can't use In the Thick of It to start with Radiant Smite and go into full Bless as fast as possible. It's not wrong. I don't even think it's that much worse than Runic Axe, to be honest. I will never, like, endorse something that's not true. I will probably never endorse non-Runic Axe variants of Guardian Fighters because it's just hard to justify giving up that much power. But this is absolutely a character where Nephthys is so uniquely strong, where Radiant Smite is so easy to enable, where it's like, yeah, if you want to use it in the thick of it for Radiant Smite and then upgrade immediate Nephthys, that's not going to be bad at all. That's going to be surprisingly close to a Runic Axe in power, because instead of the Runic Axe, you have other weapons, and all this stuff gets used on top of them as opposed to in place of them. Alright, I'm back from a fairly major detour. I spent a while looking at the possibility of, could I seriously say that Runic Axe is suboptimal in Zoey? I made a survival knife down the rabbit hole build. I ended up getting frustrated and not saving it, as I often do, and coming back to the previous list, and the reason is essentially just that this build really doesn't pump your fist very much at all. You have the bonus on your weapon, and that's it. Outside of that, you have Wolf Mask charges, provided you got Wolf Mask in play, and that's not nothing, but if you're using stuff like survival knives, machetes, enchanted blades, you're very frequently going to be attacking at the base value for that weapon. Runic Axe's base value is 3, meaning you're attacking at base 7 with the damn thing. It does so much. I forget how many problems this card solves, because the obvious thing it does is deal crazy amounts of damage. But the fact that it requires no additional card slots in your deck and single-handedly solves the fist problem in addition to that is really, really important. That's not to say at all that if you build the alternative version of this, where you go for Radiant Smites off the bat, you drop the Practice Makes Perfect for it down the rabbit hole, and you upgrade immediately into, well, probably not Nephthys with down the rabbit hole since they're 5 each, right? But you like bank some experience, you pick up Survival Knives and some other down the rabbit hole upgrades, and then on the second buy, you go into Nephthys, you never upgrade Runic Axe, you play a Survival Knife variant of the deck. I don't think that's a huge amount worse, but I think because Runic Axe is giving you just so much plus fist when you use the damn thing, it ends up still being the better build. And I wish I had come to the opposite conclusion. I could recommend you a sick-ass Nephthys immediate all-in on Bless deck, but sadly, that's not where I'm at. So in terms of what the core upgrades for the deck are, I mean, obviously it starts with Runic Axe for the aforementioned reasons, and from there it can branch out into really whatever you want. Theoretically, you could upgrade Overpower and Vicious Blows, drop something for a Strong Armed. I don't find that to really be necessary once you have a fully upgraded Runic Axe, so I would go for Stick to the Plan immediately for the economy, get E-Cache Never Vigilant guaranteed, Practice Makes Perfect at the start of the game. Branded Kathaga's great filler XP to get a better secondary weapon and backup weapon, one that can be used in conjunction with Runic Axe no less. And then once you filled out your Stick to the Plan, got in your Branded Kathagas, at that point it's up to you between Nephthys and Stand Together. Radiant Smite will likely be filler XP somewhere. It's not like a priority upgrade for me, but it's definitely something I'm looking to get at some point, where when I'm like, oh, I've got 4 experience, I can get a Stand Together level 3, and then if I've already got my brands, I will happily take a Radiant Smite. Pretty much anytime you're floating 1 to 2 experience, Radiant Smite and Branded Kathaga will be great upgrades, and really the order after the Runic Axe is kind of up to you. I will always go main weapon followed by stick to the plan on Guardians because it's just, this is how I do my job. This is how I more reliably find the stuff to do my job. But after the initial 17 experience from Runic Axe, stick to the plan, ever vigilant, it's really the world is your oyster, upgrade in whatever order you want, and realistically, you'll very frequently not get that at 17 experience. You'll get it like 20 to 22, and you'll have had some filler upgrades where you got brands and radiant smites along the way. And I really didn't want to end the video without having shown off like what the survival knife deck ends up looking like. It's very similar as you'd imagine. I have an extra backup weapon so I can have Branded Gathaga as a backup weapon still alongside my survival knives, but I still need just consistency in finding a second weapon to go with them, so we're up a card slot there, costing us a vicious blow. But at the end of the day, we're down 6 experience in the Runic Axe deck, and I really couldn't justify going for down the rabbit hole with survival knives, mainly because when you look at the deck core, it's pretty much an exact wash. You just have enough new cheap things in parallel Zoey that you're interested in that you end up, especially if you're prioritizing Nephthys, you just don't get enough out of down the rabbit hole to justify it. Over the course of a campaign, it would definitely give you bonus experiences. After this 31, you'll be doing things like upgrading overpowers, upgrading vicious blows, upgrading safeguards. You'll continue to get value after the point where it's roughly even, which is what I'm showing now. But also you will be getting that in exchange for having lost practice makes perfect or shortcut or whatever your 5th flex card was. So I do think this survival knife deck where your priority upgrade is like you start with 2 radiant smites and a Branded Gathaga, and then you're immediately aiming for Nephthys, and if you can't hit Nephthys, you're going for survival knives until you have both survival knives and Nephthys upgraded, at which point the world's your oyster, probably stick to the plan, maybe stand together. Like, this is not a meaningfully worse deck, and it is way, way cooler. So I didn't want to end the video without showing it at all. Coming over to my tier list, I have half parallel Blessed Zoey at the very top of my B tier, and she's one of the characters where I struggle the most to say how I feel she should be ranked. Because on the one hand, she's single-handedly enabling Bless, dealing massive amounts of damage, decently resilient to the Mythos phase. If you're planning on running a Nephthys eventually with base 4 head, she has access to Promise of Power, which puts her meaningfully above Nacho in all regards to the Mythos. Definitely worse at killing, but not like all that much worse, not really meaningfully worse. I wouldn't want to parallel Zoey to 3-man fight the way I would trust a Nacho or a Tony to do it, but I would absolutely trust her to main fight for literally any team in the game, provided she wasn't solely responsible for more than 2 people fighting. One of the questions I often ask myself when I'm trying to figure out if I have a character in the right or wrong tier is I'm like, all right, do I think you're categorically in the same tier as the person at the bottom of your tier or the top of the next tier? So I think parallel Zoey, because I've listed so many strengths for her. Enabling Bless, easily dealing with monsters, relatively resilient to the Mythos, no incredible reliability, but she still gets to use Dunwich Slash on Deep Knowledge, and that's not nothing. Like, she's very, very, very good. The question is, like, do I personally like parallel Zoey a lot, and that's why I'm using the word very, or does she actually deserve to be in very strong? And every time I look at parallel skids, I'm like, oh man, I don't know. Is he gonna come down? Does he get to actually be an A tier, or am I too nice to that man? We'll get to him someday. But for now, on parallel Zoey, do I think she's playing in the same world as a Preston Fairmont or a Stella Clark or a Monterey Jack? Definitely as we get higher in the tier, I'm like, yeah, she's in the same world as a Monterey or a Kaimani, I think. Whereas comparing her to a Lily, like sure, Lily's not interacting with Bless and there is value in enabling Bless for your team. However, Lily is much more reliably killing enemies from scenario 1. She scales up meaningfully well to have even comparable burst damage to Zoey with the foot discipline. She's more Mythos resilient, very reliable because she gets access. It's a little bit unfair to judge people on our partial knowledge of new card pools from Drowned City. To some degree, it's a little bit of an unfair comparison because I've already proxied and tested True Awakening and Lily, and I know that like this is a very meaningful amount of consistency to staple onto a character. Hilariously, Zoey isn't actually blessed, she's just a believer. God's not on her side, she just thinks he is. So Zoey doesn't get that card. I was gonna say that I shouldn't be valuing Lily getting that card when Zoey gets the same one, but it turns out actually no, she doesn't. So getting back to the tier list, Zoey's upside, the massive when compared to Lily, is enabling the Bless archetype. In terms of scenario 1 fighting, I think Lily's meaningfully better. In terms of in-campaign fighting, I think they're more or less on par. I think Lily is more resilient to the Mythos phase, though not substantially more resilient. I think her reliability, because of the stupid Olive Bring Pride stuff, is actually a lot higher too. Oh man. She's right around where she should be. she should be nearly to just over a full tier beneath Lily. Lily's much better as a main fighter, but she doesn't enable Bless. That's the apples to oranges that makes it hard to compare it. Comparing her to Nat Show, more Mythos resilient, not able to 3-man fight, but able to fight incredibly well all the same, enabling Blesses. I think she just barely gets over the threshold for B tier. And then I like immediately look at her being up there and I'm like, no, maybe Skids doesn't deserve to be there. Maybe Skids doesn't deserve to be there. I'm gonna move him down to the top of my B for now and see if I think, because what's messing with me is I put her up here next to Skids. I'm like, neither of you belong here. But I think Skids is the one that doesn't deserve to be an A tier. I don't think she's better than Akachi. Like, there's not a lot of room to move her up. Akachi and Ursula are really, really powerful characters. It's just how much value do I place on enabling Bless? And it sort of depends on who's capitalizing on it, because if it's the new parallel Father Mateo, then yeah, this half parallel Bless Zoey plus half parallel Father Mateo, where they both just use their new parallel fronts, that's probably one of the strongest duos in the game. Like, that is actually cracked. But for anyone other than parallel Father Mateo, I think the Blesses are a lot less valuable. I think bottom of A tier is where she deserves to be. I think it's really close. I think she should probably be on the border of A and B, one side or the other. And I think bottom of A tier is really accurate to how strong she is. I also don't like having a potential candidate for one of the best duos in the game beneath A tier just in general. Like, that requires some incredible niche synergy, and the thing that is synergizing for Parallel Zoey is not particularly niche. I guess I'll have to get the Parallel Skids sometime soon and see where I can move him up or down to. Parallel Skids is a character that I absolutely adore, and it really messes up my analysis of the character. It doesn't help that my last time playing him was forcing him to be a healer in Hunters of the Mythos, where I then learned that if you use all of your foot skills on dodging snakes, you do not have foot skills to commit to gambling, which does make him a lot worse. I shoehorned him into a box that he was not well suited for in that, and that might be coloring my perspective negatively. Maybe when I sit down and really look at Parallel Skids again, I can move him back up even a couple of spots, because in his heyday, I think I had Parallel Skids like in this block with Norman and the other powerhouses. I do think Parallel Skids are gonna end up back in A tier somewhere, and I look at my tier list steadily getting larger as it goes up, and I hate it. I hate how top heavy it always feels. That's not that bad, really. I've got 10 in S, 10 in D, and the middle 3 tiers are all hovering right around 12. I'm gonna count S plus broken as existing outside the tier list and not really worry about it. This is more or less bell curve. I'm fine with this. I don't think for a 5-tier tier list that's too top heavy. And I do think Parallel Skids will end up making it into my A tier. Anyway, this video is supposed to be about Parallel Zoey, so what do I have to say as I wrap up on her? Not a lot that hasn't been covered already. She's incredibly strong, just having Vicious Blow on tap as an ability, combine that with Ancestral Token plus her own ability to generate Blesses, and it's very, very powerful. I never really covered it in the video. A huge part of Survival Knife being really uniquely good in Parallel Zoey is that her ability to add the Bless by dealing damage is actually once per phase, not once per round. So Survival Knife combat methods can actually add multiple Blesses in a round, which is better than Sister Mary. She's just very good at fighting in general due to the extra Vicious Blows. If you can build a deck that reliably draws the pieces you need, which is why I'm using those flex slots on Deep Knowledge, then you're gonna be in a really good spot. She's also a character where I was really trying to fit in a backpack for the Ancestral Tokens and all the melee weapons. The deck has so many things it wants, and it's very hard to trim it down to 30 cards. She's one of the characters falling victim to that, where it's like, man, if this were a game where base deck size was 40, Parallel Zoey might move up a couple of spots, because there are characters that really don't want their 31st card, and Parallel Zoey is not one of them. She's brilliant though. I want to be clear, like, once I'm talking about characters above like the middle of B tier even, I'm talking about characters that crush the campaign. Parallel Zoey is so much stronger than the obstacles that will be thrown at her, and we're really discussing, like, to exactly what degree of obscenity are we going to be stomping the game? Like, what's the television rating for the violence we're about to enact upon the scenarios, is what you're discussing towards the top of B versus A versus S. And I think Zoey's probably rated T for teen. I don't think you should bring kids to watch what Zoey's about to do to this poor Carcosa campaign, but you don't have to be a full-grown adult to watch it. She's just really, really good. And yeah, having her in A tier is right. It feels so much more correct having her in A at all rather than in B. I feel like she is just miles above the bottom of B tier, and she is in the same realm as Lily. Categorically worse as a main fighter, but enabling Bless has a lot of value elsewhere, so I think she gets to be an A. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Thank you for your time. If you made it this far, then please do hit all the buttons to make the algorithm happy. And a massive thank you to everyone supporting this channel, both on YouTube as channel members and over on Patreon as patrons. I'll see all of you in the next one.